So first of all, I just want to tell you, when we spoke on Per Gimel Pasuk Chavav, and let's see, what page is that? Gimel Chavav, 958. So we were talking about the idea, we had been speaking about the idea of when you do something, so you're credited with more than what you've done if you've affected other people. Right? That was what he had spoken about. The ripple effect, correct. So there's an interesting, what do you call it? In the beginning of the state of Israel, I don't know if you're aware of the history in Israel, when particularly the Yemenites came here. So the Zionists, the anti-religious Zionists they took the Yemenites and put them in these holding pens, these camps, and they tried cutting off their payas. They tried doing whatever. They told them, you don't need that. Once you're in Israel, you don't need the religion. And there was all sorts of blackmail, because you couldn't get a job unless you'd renounced your religion. And this happening in Israel, from Jews to Jews. You couldn't get your job unless you renounced your religion, and they cut off your payas and everything else. And then there was the issue that they took Yemenite babies and they kidnapped them. That's a scandal that goes back to the 50s, where they kidnapped babies from parents. They told the babies they died in the hospitals and that they were buried there. By the time the parents got there, they'd already given them up to adoption for Ashkenazi families. It was a very bad stage in the development of the country. In any event, what they used to do is they used to send activists, the Chazon Ish particularly, would send activists, young activists, to try to put away all the technology. Please put away the technology, or use it outside. Don't use it while we're learning Torah. What do you call it? So the Chazon Ish, I told you once, it's not respectful for Torah to have technology with goodness knows what's on it while you're learning Torah.
Can I just reestablish?
Yeah, no, you could do that. You could take notes on it. Yes, you could take notes on it. Yeah, but but the kitzel around with it is disrespectful to the Torah, disrespectful for everybody, disrespectful for oneself. So the Chazon Ish was very involved in sending people, these activists. They would try to penetrate into the camps. They'd bring them tefillin and try to teach them Yiddishkeit and everything else. And at a certain point, he sent these two activists. Now, they got to the camp, and there's a big fence outside the camp. There was a barbed wire fence, and they had armed guards patrolling, so that the frum guys wouldn't penetrate in and chas v'sholom teach Yiddishkeit to these Yemenites who were incarcerated. And so these two guys were sent by the Chazon Ish. And what happened was they spent a few hours. Now, what they used to do, in certain times, they would tunnel under the fence. They'd actually tunnel under to wait till the guards aren't there and tunnel under the fence and get in. That's what they did. These guys get there, and they're walking back and forth, and there's armed guards, and the armed guards are patrolling. The armed guards see them outside the fence, and they just keep their eyes on them. So these guys wait. They patrol back and forth, these Yeshivat Ohr back and forth for about 3-4 hours. After 3-4 hours, they couldn't do it. They couldn't get in. There was no opportunity to get in. The guards were there. So they went back to the Chazon Ish and say, look, that's what we did, and it was a waste of time. Nothing happened. Chazon Ish said, you did what you had to do. Let Ribbon Shalom take care of the rest. Our job is to do. Ribbon Shalom doesn't want it to work. He doesn't want the results. That's up to Hashem. But you did what you had to do. Okay. About 20 years later, one of these guys, who was no longer a young bacher, one of the guys was older, he was already married, he went to a wedding. And he sits down, there's an elderly Yemenite Jew at the wedding. And this Yemenite Jew is there, he's got a beard and payas, and he's got his family around him, and they're all frum. And they started schmoozing. And the guy said to this Yemenite, he said, where are you from? This, that, the other. The Yemenite told him, and he told him his whole background. He says, we were in the camps, and they were pressuring us to do away with our religion. And they said to me that I should cut off my beard, because there are no more Jews wearing beards in the world. Jews don't have beards anymore. And one night, I was outside taking a walk, and I saw these two yeshiva bachrim with beards walking back and forth outside the fence. I had decided that day I was going to cut off my beard. That night I was outside watching. I decided the next day I was going to shave off my beard, and away goes the religion. That night I saw these two yeshiva boys marching back and forth outside the fence for about 3-4 hours. And I looked at it and said, hey, there are guys with beards around. Well, I'm not cutting off my beard. The next day I said to the guy, forget about it. I held out. And eventually we got out of the camps. I got married. I have a family. This is my family, and they're all from all the generations. So that's a result of the effort of these two guys. So sometimes you do something in life, you don't even know what you're doing. You don't know that you've done something, that you've accomplished something, yet what you've accomplished, even when you haven't accomplished what the immediate goal was, there could be major effects, and this major effects then affect future generations. That was the story number one. Story number two is a very well-known story. There was a Jew who came to, a Jew went to a doctor, a frum Jew, and he was diagnosed with a disease, with a terminal illness. So the doctor said to him, you have two choices. The secular Jewish doctor, he said, you have two choices. You could either let the disease run its course, and in a matter of about 6 months, you'll die rather painlessly, or you could begin a series of treatments which are going to be very, very difficult to handle, and it'll keep you alive for another 3 or 4 years. What do you want to do? So he said, I can't tell you. I have to go speak to my Rav, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. So he went to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and said, what should I do? So Rabbi Moshe said, well, let's make a calculation. In the course of the next 3-4 years, how many times are you going to say Kriyat Shema? How many times are you going to answer Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah? How many pages of Gemara are you going to learn? How many mitzvahs are you going to do? How many times are you going to make Kiddush? And so on and so forth. And Rabbi Moshe said, you have to try to keep yourself alive as long as possible. So the guy goes back to the doctor. He says, okay, I'm going to go for the treatment. So the doctor says to him, okay, come back in 4 weeks. Takes time to set it up and determine the course. Says, oh, we'll start in 4 weeks, we'll start the treatment. Okay, the guy goes home, comes back to the hospital 4 weeks later, knocks on the doctor's door. It says Dr. Goldstein, the big nameplate on the door. He says, Dr. Goldstein. He knocks on the door, and he come in, he walks in, and there, Dr. Goldstein's not there. There's some frum guy with the yarmulke and with a little beard and with a big tzitzis over his thing. I says, sorry, and I'm looking for Dr. Goldstein. He starts walking out. He says, hold it, it's me. He does a double take, and sure enough, it's Dr. Goldstein. He says, what's going on? So the guy says to him, listen, I've been an oncologist for about 30 years. This is in all the years I've been an oncologist, when I've given people the choice, they've all taken the choice of letting the disease run and die painlessly. You're the first person who's chosen to go through the course of treatment. I went and spoke to your Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and he explained to me what a Torah is, what a Jew is, what a mitzvah is, and myself and my entire family have since then become Balei Tshuva, since what do you call it. Now, if you stop and think that Rav Moshe made a calculation with this guy about what his own mitzvahs are going to be, or what he will accomplish in 3 or 4 years. He never made the calculation of what you're going to now have the credit for an entire another family, and so on and so forth. So that's what we were talking about, that a person does not know, we have no idea. The Gemara says there are 7 things that are hidden from every person. 7 things that nobody knows. For example, nobody knows how he's going to succeed in business. You try a business, you don't know which business is going to succeed. Person doesn't know when they have a problem, when the problem's going to end. The person doesn't know what the unborn child is, what the gender of the child is going to be, obviously without, without technology. And even then they make mistakes. A person doesn't know, a lot of things that a person doesn't know. One of the things that a person doesn't know what his friend is thinking. For good reason, by the way. Because if you knew what he was thinking, it wouldn't be your friend. And And one of the things that a person does not know is what's called omek hadin. Omek hadin means the depth of judgment. That means we don't know the depth of judgment in the future, exactly how God calculates things. We think we understand because you get a mitzvah, you get a rabbi. The depth of how God makes calculations of when you do one thing and it affects other people and how many people it affects is beyond human comprehension. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that. By the way, I know of one case where a guy was told by the doctor that they're going to have a girl, and his wife with the ultrasound, and it turned out to be a boy. And the father, he says, Mazel tov, it's a boy. He goes, no, but the ultrasound said it's a girl. The guy, it didn't even register, right? And I have a guy in my neighborhood who they did her ultrasound. Okay, they have a baby, it's inside, whatever the gender was. The wife gave birth, and for some reason her stomach didn't go down. And about 10 minutes later, she gave birth to another one. They never picked up. They didn't pick up on the ultrasound, and she had twins inside. The ultrasound is not 100. It's good. The ultrasound is good. It's not 100%, right? So the Gemara says you don't know what the unborn gender is going to be. I've known of a couple of cases like that where a woman gave birth that did not know that there were twins. So before ultrasound, not everybody, there wasn't always ultrasound, but that sort of thing happens. But so the Gemara says we don't know, and we have no way of calculating Omek Hadin, the depth of judgment, how Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to calculate things. Number one. Number two, I want to show you something else very powerful here. Extremely, extremely powerful. If you take a look at Perek Vov Pasuk Hey, skipping on ahead. I told you about the guy benching at Ohr Somayach, right? So that sound familiar? Ohr Somayach used to have an Israeli. There was like an Israeli section here also, and they used to be on the third floor. And I used to stay here, and I used to eat lunch. And then they would eat lunch, and I would come in. And then the second shift, the Anglos would come in and eat lunch. So the Israelis had finished lunch. And there was one guy who was Sephardi, who I came in, and every day I saw this guy. And this guy was sitting, he came in late and took a long time eating lunch, and then he would bench. And he was sitting on the other side of the room, and he would bench. But when he benched, his benching was, he would kind of sing it to himself with a lot of hand gestures. And I'd be watching this guy, and I watched this guy for a while. And the guy was there every day, and he's benching. And my first thought for the beginning was, all right, his temperature's a little high. That's all. He's got to, he'll get a little more comfortable with his Yiddishkeit. And this went on every day. And then eventually I started thinking to myself, why should I be so critical? The guy's really benching. The guy is really benching. And so I decided, I think maybe I should work on my own benching a little bit. So, I went home, I started benching. Listen, I didn't bring down angels. But at the I started to get a little more focused, and I did that for about a week. I said, I should really thank the guy. I should really thank this guy. The guy inspired me. Without even trying, the guy inspired me. So next day I decided I'd say thank you. So the next day he didn't show up. I never saw him again. Right? So now there are two possibilities. Possibility number one is he's Elio and Navi and he was sent down just for me. Possibility number two is he found another yeshiva that he liked better. That's also a possibility. So whatever the conclusion is, but at the end of the day, he wasn't even trying. Oh, I got to tell you this one. There was an Israeli Baal Tshuva, documented and said, an Israeli Baal Tshuva, and somebody once asked him what inspired him to become a Baal Tshuva. Now listen to this story, guys. This is unbelievable. What inspired him to become a Baal Tshuva? So the guy said he was a regular secular Israeli, and he was sitting with a bunch of friends in a bar or a club somewhere in Dizengoff in Tel Aviv. And one day he's sitting there, and he sees a yeshiva bacher who's cutting across Dizengoff, an 18-year-old yeshiva bacher. And this 18-year-old yeshiva bacher is looking straight at the ground. And the guy says to his friends, one second, I got to check something. And he walks out, and he followed this yeshiva bacher across Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv. And he followed him all the way across. He said this yeshiva bacher never picked his eyes up off the ground. He said if there's a force in creation, if there's a force in the world that could get an 18-year-old male not to look around and Dizengoff in Tel Aviv, I have to find out what it is. So he went, checked it out, became a Baal Tshuva as a result. How do you like that? And there was a guy who didn't do anything. All he was doing, okay, should a yeshiva bacher be cutting across Dizengoff? Try to find a detour. Right? Yeah. Don't go where you got to look down. Where we got. On the other hand, maybe he had to be there. I don't know. Maybe a doctor's appointment. I don't know what it was. At the end of the day, you don't know. A person never knows what effect they're having, what effect you're having on other people. I know a guy when I was in L.A. a couple of months ago. I was in L.A. There's a guy that I stayed with. He runs programs. He runs these Shabbatons in L.A. So this guy has an unbelievable. He's actually a guy started at Ohr Somayach. He's got an unbelievable memory for faces, names and faces. So he said he was walking in, and he arranges these Shabbatos. I actually did a Shabbatot with him just outside of Los Angeles. I think it burned down now when they had a big fire. They had the big fires in LA. But we did it. There was a campsite we did with it. Okay. So the guy tells me he was in a supermarket. He's shopping. And I go, well, lady comes up to me. She looks like she's about 29, 30, whatever it is. She comes up to me. She says, hi, Rabbi Plony, do you remember me? This is a guy who remembers faces, remembers names. And he goes, I'm sorry, I don't remember ever meeting. She goes, it's not your fault. You see, about 10 years ago, you ran a Shabbaton. I was dating a non-Jewish guy. You ran a Shabbaton, and a friend of mine said to me, come on, let's go to the Shabbaton. We'll hear some speakers, we'll have some good food, that sort of thing. I told her, frankly, I wasn't very interested. I came to the Shabbaton. I really didn't attend many of the lectures. And I was only there because I needed a break from vacation. I needed a break from work. So I went to the Shabbaton. This guy told me this 2 months ago. I needed a break from the Shabbaton. But, Friday night, he had the big communal meal. And I was sitting there. I never came over to introduce myself, so it's not your fault you don't remember my name. But I was sitting there, and I watched you. Your family was with you. And right before you made Kiddush, you gave a bracha to your children. I saw you blessing your children. You know how the father blesses the children? I saw you blessing your children. I thought to myself, wow, it's possible in our day and age for a father to have that kind of connection with his children. That's what I want, right? So I broke up with my boyfriend the next day. I think he got married for a Jewish guy from Guy, v'chulu, right? That was the last thing he was trying to do. He wasn't even doing that on the Shabbaton. Everything he arranged around it, and what turned out to be the biggest effect, something he wasn't even trying, something he was doing probably subconsciously, wasn't even trying. I had a guy here today. This guy is he's married. His son is going to Yeshiva now. This guy was at Ohr Somayach. He was here for months. He was in my Gemara shir, and he came to the Parsha shir, and he was here for months. One day we came in the afternoon. I was giving a shir at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was a bris here or something, some sort of celebration. So class is supposed to run from 3 to 4 o'clock. So it was about 5 to 4. They hadn't cleaned out the place. It was 5 to 4. So a bunch of guys were milling around outside. I said, come on, guys, we'll learn for 5 minutes. So we came in here for 5 minutes, and I told them there was a yeshiva in Europe, the Kelm Yeshiva, that had on every Saturday night, they had a 5-minute Seder. Did you ever hear that? Every Motzei Shabbos, boys had to come to the base measures for 5 minutes. Why did they do that? They wanted to show them the value of time. You can learn for 5 minutes. If you learn a few psukim, you'll see that in the course of a few weeks, what you've done 5 minutes at a time, 5 minutes at a time, or a couple of Mishnahs, or a couple of halachas, or a couple of pages of Gemara, you'll see what accumulates. They wanted to teach them the value of time. Okay? Good. A few months later, the guy's leaving the yeshiva. This guy left the yeshiva. He said to me, Rabbi, I want to thank you for the classes, blah, blah. The class that had the most effect on me was that 5-minute class. I was ready to grab the guy around the neck and give him a shake. I put hours into this guy. I put hours and hours. Had I known, I would have just given the 5-minute class every day. The guy today, he's married, has a family. His kid just started yeshiva. You just never know. You just never know in life. You could try this. You try, and it's something from left field that has the effect. Okay, now I want to show you something else. What did I tell you? What parak? Vav, hey. Yeah. Okay.
972.
Oh, okay. So this is, we start Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha. You have to love Hashem with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your possessions. And what that means is, B'chol nafshecha means that if you're facing the 3 cardinal sins, you have to give up your life rather than sin. Uv'chol meodecha means that you have to give up all of your money rather than transgress even a minor avera. That's all your money. Okay, that's the halacha. Your life is only for the 3 cardinals of avera, idol worship, immorality, and murder, and even that under certain circumstances. Because if it's in front of 10 Jews and there's a Kiddush Hashem, then you have to die. Then what do you call it? Then you have to give up your life for other mitzvahs as well. Okay. I want to explain to you a concept. Now I want you to imagine the following. Imagine you win the lottery, and you win $20 million. We've all had this daydream, right? You win the lottery, and we promise. I said, I would give so much to tzedakah if I did. Some guy in California just won $1 billion and a little bit more than $1 billion in the Powerball. Yeah, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And the guy who's the store who sold it to him, the convenience store where he bought it, that guy gets $1 million. Because they give for the store a percentage of the, what do you call it? Yeah, that wasn't me either. So soon say Mirza Hashem by you. Yeah, Hashem by you. By which one? The first one or the second one? My wife said to me, "You wouldn't want $1 billion." Oh yes, I would. Oh yes, I would. What would you do? You'd be so far tumult with $1 million. I'll try it. Right? I'll risk it. While I'll think about it while I'm in my chauffeured Mercedes. So I'll think about my issues. Well, you don't get $1 billion. I think if you take a lump payout, you only get about $400 million. Right? But I could get used to that. So what do you call it? So imagine the following. You win the lottery. You win $20 million. And you're in such a good mood that you decide you're not only going to give 10% to tzedakah, you're going to give 20%. You're going to give $4 million to tzedakah because that's the maximum you could give. So you go to the local Shabbos relief organization in your city. Every city they provide poor families with food for Shabbos. And you give the guy $4 million. Guys take the $4 million. There are 500 poor families in town. And now those 500 families have 3 meals every Shabbos for every member of the family for an entire year because of your $4 million. How do you think you'd go to sleep on how do you think you'd feel Motzei Shabbos knowing your $4 million supported 500 families, gave them Shabbos? Feel pretty good, right? Okay. What would happen if, on your way to give the $4 million, the anti-Semite pulls out a gun, he stops you, he pulls out a piece of pork, he says, you take one bite of pork or I confiscate the $4 million. Your life isn't a threat, your money is. What's the halacha based on this pasuk? You got to give up all your money. You got to give up all your money. What about the $4 million? What about the 500 families? What about the benefits of everything else? Yeah, we don't make that calculation. And with Judaism, the means do not justify that. The ends do not justify the means. That means we have to do what Hashem wants us to do. And Hashem says, don't eat pork. Don't worry about the 500 families. That's not your job. Your job, unless it's life-threatening, which it isn't, that's not your job. No, they're not going to starve to death, assuming they won't starve to death. They just won't have nice Shabbos. That's not your job. Your job is to do what the Ribono Shalom wants. Now, the guy pulls out a gun and he says, take a bite of pork or I'm going to take away the $4 million. You won't have an opportunity to give away the $4 million. What's the halacha? The halacha is you got to give up your money. Okay. I don't believe that there's anybody in this room who would even see that as a test. None of us are going to eat pork. We're just not going to do it. It's not going to happen. We're not going to take a bite of pork. But what if the guy pulled a gun, the guy said, okay, I want to hear one sentence of Lashon Hara. Otherwise I take away the $4. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering Lashon Hara. It doesn't have to be something, it doesn't have to be like a shidduch breaker. You know, it could be something like Moshe has messy handwriting, right? That's good, solid Lashon Hara l'mahadrin min ha-mahadrin, right? Yeah, you can't say it. You can't say it in a whisper, and you can't say it fast, and you can't say anything. All you have to do is give up the money. Okay? Now, that doesn't only apply to Lashon Hara. It applies to lying. It applies to insulting people. These are all averas. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. In the course of the last week, at any point were you either going to speak Lashon Hara, insult somebody, lie, swear, or do anything else verbally and you restrained yourself in the course of the week? You know, I really shouldn't say that. If you did, in the course of the last week, once, then what you did is bigger than giving the $4 million to the tzedakah. How do I know? Because when there's a conflict between the two, you have to give up the money and not do the avera. That means every time we exercise restraint, right? If there's a conflict, it's speak Lashon Hara or the money, what do? Your money or your Lashon Hara, right? So what do? You have to give up the money. So if they give up the money, that means not speaking Lashon Hara overrides what you could have done with the money. So whatever good you would have done with the money, by refraining from saying something wrong, you've done something that's the same magnitude or more. So you don't even realize that in the course of a day, not only what you're doing, what you're not doing is also an effect. Restraint is an effect. If you have a desire to go buy something non-kosher and you don't go, so you've refrained. Why did you refrain? You refrained only because Hashem said not to do it. So what you've done now is something that overrides even $4 million. That's what the Torah is telling you. The Torah is telling you a person has to stop and realize that in the course of the difficulties and the challenges that we face, there's a lot at stake over here. And you have to realize what is happening, what the effects are. In the same way that there are effects of the things you do which you don't see, there are also effects of the things that you don't do. And the effects of the things that we don't do, that accumulates a certain type of reward for us. And again, these are calculations only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. Okay. So I'm going to wish everybody a good Tisha B'Av, a meaningful Tisha B'Av, and it's a hot Tisha B'Av. That I don't have to wish on you. What do you call it? There's plenty of time. There's plenty of time, and what do you call it? I told you I told you about my rabbi who was at the wall. And Rabbi of mine was at the Kaisel, and a non-Jewish tourist was a Tisha of a non-Jewish tourist. So she saw everybody's crying. So there's one story where they said, "Why is everybody crying?" She said, "Well, the temple was destroyed." She said, "Oh, they didn't have insurance, huh?" That was one story. There was another story where they said a rabbi of mine. That wasn't my rabbi. A rabbi of mine, this non-Jewish tourist, said, "This is your rabbi, aren't you?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, this is the spot the temple stood, isn't it?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Can I ask you a question? Are there going to be sacrifices here today?" So he said to her, "Well, as of right now, no, but maybe later today." So that's really the optimism we're supposed to go into Tisha B'Av with. All right, everybody have a good fast. We'll see.